Hello everyone, my name is Jo Nicholson-Biss. I'm the event manager for the Institute of Leadership and Management. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. Today's webinar is about resilience. It's my great pleasure to introduce Rachel James-Patt. She's the owner of Fairway Learning, development specialist. She's highly skilled, inspirational facilitator. Rachel, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be here today to support this webinar. As you probably know, the Institute of Leadership and Management identifies 5 separate dimensions of great leadership, namely authenticity, ownership, achievement, vision, and collaboration. Each of the 49 webinars of this series focuses on one of the components of each dimension, highlighting essential learning for you to assist your leadership development. Today, we're going to be focusing in on the 3rd dimension of leadership webinar series. The 3rd dimension is achievement. There are several components that make up achievement. Great leaders are high performers. They will have direction, deliver measurable results, are proud of their work, stretch themselves and others, and are adaptable to ensure sustainability. Today, we're really honing in on through achievement to resilience. We will explore this key component. The webinar itself will last 25 minutes, and as Jane has already said, there will be opportunities for you to submit questions, which we'll address towards the end of the webinar. At the end of the webinar, we'll also send you a list of references for further reading. So let's begin. So yes, achieving leaders. What a concept that is, always aiming to be resilient, to continue to effectively lead and perform regardless of circumstance. It is a leader's responsibility to lead through good times and bad, and there are many great examples in the public arena. One that really stands out for me is Malala Yousafzai. She actually said in 2013 she wants to be remembered as the girl who stood up, not the girl who was shot. I think that really embodies leadership for me, that resilience within leadership. We remember her achievements in motivating young girls and females across the world to pursue an education, as opposed to remembering her as the victim who was shot because she did that herself. And that to me embodies resilient leadership. So what is resilience? So here's some food for thought here. Something that we all possess, a strength we can tap into. I'm sure that you'll look back over your own life, whether that be your career or your childhood, and recognise moments where you've had the determination to pursue an interest, an activity, an aspiration, even when times aren't so good. It's about choosing to embrace the gift of adversity, because things do go wrong sometimes, don't they? And use that gift to strengthen our leadership ability and reputation, because when we can continue to perform in times of duress, as it says there, situations that can cause concern or even fear, that's when we can role model best practice to the people who follow us. With every struggle comes tremendous opportunity. It's about recognising the lesson within the situation. So although resilience is reacting to a situation in the moment, building your resilience is about reflecting on times of adversity in the past when we've got up and we've had another go. So maybe it's a sport situation, maybe we failed an exam, maybe friendships have gone off track. For me, a big memory was trying to climb a tree, and everybody else in my cul-de-sac as a child could climb this tree on the corner of the street. And I was scared and I kept falling. And in reality, I probably wasn't more than a foot above the ground. But I remember the sense of determination to climb that tree. And I can pull on that example now to think about what it feels like when you do achieve through adversity. So where does resilience come from? That part of us that gets us through something new and challenging, because it doesn't necessarily need to be a difficult circumstance. It can just be something outside of our comfort zone. And as we all know, that's where growth and magic happens. Resilience refers to how well you can deal with and bounce back from difficulties in those moments, though. How we can maybe calm our inner critic, how we can stretch our own boundaries. It can mean the difference between handling pressure and losing your cool. Resilient people tend to maintain a more positive outlook and cope with stress more effectively. We'll explore that a little more as we go through the session today. Another inspirational woman who I think embodies this, J.K. Rowling. Imagine having 12 publishers rejecting your work. But for her, she says it's impossible to live without failing at something. I think that's something we can all reflect on. Those times when maybe we felt that we haven't achieved. What do we do to push through that? So the characteristics of resilience: grit, having a positive mindset, managing in a crisis, and mental toughness. These are the 4 concepts we're going to explore in the next 20 minutes or so. Your actions in times of challenge will serve as that role model to your followers. It's very difficult to have a resilient team if you are not yourself a resilient leader. So let's explore these one at a time. Starting with grit. So I'm sure some of you would have seen this model by Duckworth before. But if we take each of these elements one at a time. So the first one is living on purpose. To do this, you need to know your purpose. Whether that be an organisational objective or a personal value, you need to know what your end goal is. And then that knowledge can help drive your actions. We also need to review and assess progress regularly, so have some mid-level goals that feed into that overarching bigger goal. Any of you have ever tried to have an exercise regime or maybe lose weight, we know that's much more achievable if we break that down into small milestones. So we have that feeling of success as we aim towards that bigger purpose. Persevere, so it says there about the goals and habits, and it is really about considering healthy habits. Whether that be your supporting social network, the people that you surround yourself with, or whether that be exercise or diet, as I've just mentioned, but thinking about the healthy habits that we can form. They're also thinking about and challenging the habits that aren't so healthy. So maybe for me, I know it's if I spend too much time on social media, it's not so healthy. It eats away my time and also eats away my resilience because I'm not pursuing positive activities so much. They're more of a passive activity. And then finally, that inner critic. We've all had those moments of self-doubt or that always happens to me, or those sorts of phrases. Challenge those core values and beliefs. It's helpful to ask yourself, is this true all the time, some of the time, or never? Because some of the things we tell ourselves are not proven. They've maybe never happened. Also, a positive mantra or phrase can help in those moments of self-doubt. So my favourite one, it comes from a TV programme, it's a comedian, but I always say to myself, well, what would Beyonce do? But don't ask yourself something as flamboyant, it's up to you. Maybe you just say, what's the worst that can happen? Jane and I have said that to each other a few times with technology over this webinar. So that's grit. And optimism above all, for some people that can sound a little bit hippie or a little bit unrealistic. And what we mean by that optimism above all is really that positive mindset. So having a positive mindset isn't about thinking everything's positive all of the time. There's strong links between the concepts of positive mindset and emotional intelligence. And the links are to just recognise what is realistic and practical. Recognise that both positive and negative things can happen. And as humans, we will feel positive and negative emotions. What we need to avoid doing, though, is labelling those emotions good or bad. Whether it's a negative emotion like frustration or a positive emotion like enthusiasm, both of those emotions will inform our behaviour, can inform our decisions and our choices. So let's look at number 1. Confident leaders believe in their ability to motivate others. We can only motivate others when we are connecting in with the authenticity of self, so self-management, and then we can authentically manage and support others. We can harness our emotions to inform and support our objectives. Hopeful leaders feel empowered to control their current domain. Hopeful leaders will always look for the opportunity, even in adversity, and they can help develop that within their team. Optimistic leaders, so that is, I've already said, they think deeply about all events, even negative ones, to pull the learning from that moment, pull the learning from that event. What could we do differently next time? And then the resilience of bouncing back. It's because the focus is beyond the here and now. the focus extends to the future. So we know that we can push through those times, whether it's remembering climbing a tree in your past or something more dramatic, like poor Malala when she was shot. It's about focusing your purpose on, why was I in this situation? How can that inform what I do next? Maybe have an emotions audit, whether you do that a couple of times a month. I tend to do it once a quarter. Have an emotions audit. Think about what situations gave you a positive response, what situations gave you a negative response, and what did you learn from those situations? Identify your own hot buttons. What caused the reaction? What might you do differently the next time you're faced with that same situation? Observe other people that you see as resilient. Try to identify things and strategies that you can take from them. So personal resilience. We can look at this at a bigger level though. Let's look at how resilient practices can support organisations beyond the obvious HR metrics such as retention, sick days due to stress, etc. Actually, if we are resilient as individuals and teams, crisis management is something that is enhanced within an organisation. So in crisis management, as it says there, the threat is the potential damage the crisis can inflict on the organisation, not so much the crisis itself. It's about stakeholder management, it's about industry reputation. It's thinking about the safety, the loss of reputation or financial. So again, let's look at this one in a little more detail. As it says there, it sits alongside risk management and business continuity management. It's to protect against or mitigate against public relations crisis and minimise any negative impact to the organisation or the reputation of the individuals within the organisation in the public arena when crisis comes to town, shall we say. So there's some golden rules of crisis management that have strong links to personal and team resilience. The first thing there, that take responsibility, is about not trying to cover up, acknowledge concerns that people may have, questions they may have. So whether this is within the organisation to your immediate team or out with the organisation to key stakeholders and shareholders. Have a plan to consider social media. Even if you don't use it yourself or your organisation doesn't use it, your clients or customers might. So have a plan for if a crisis hits, what will you do to manage the social media impact? It says there, get ahead of the story. So I know quite often if a crisis hits, the instinctive thing to do is to go away and find out exactly what happened. But we need to be able to give an immediate response first. An authentic immediate response is the best way forward. Strategy can come later, but you need to say something up front, get ahead of that story and be human with that. So don't say no comment. Say you need more information if that's what you need, because then the public or the stakeholders can recognise, actually, you've got this under control. Don't fuel the fire. Doing the right thing beats spin every time. So to be resilient in this situation is not just about managing self, it's about supporting and managing your team around you. So listen to your team, listen to their concerns. Don't think you need to deal with the crisis completely on your own. Sit behind that strong organisational brand once you've developed it. As you know, I'm the owner of Fairway, so our brand, the Fairway, governs everything that we do. Be prepared, have a strategy just the same as you would if the fire alarm goes off within a building. You know what you're going to do, you know what the exit plan is. Have a strategy for communication if a crisis does hit the organisation. Now we're moving on to mental toughness, because it's all well and good to talk about resilience and how you would handle a crisis situation on behalf of the organisation or your team. But mental toughness is something where we're really recognising our backs against the wall, but we're pushing through. Mental toughness was a term coined by a leading sports psychologist, Jim Loher. And what he was talking about, that ability to constantly perform to the upper end of your ability, regardless of circumstance. So developing mental toughness and strength is about you being able to do that yourself, to live according to your values, to be authentic to who you are. Mental strength is how we respond to pressure, challenge, and stress, irrespective of circumstance. Resilience is often a reaction in the moment. Mental toughness gives us the opportunity to consider building strategies to ultimately increase our resilience. So Peter Clough, on the screen here now, mentioned on the screen here now, he actually brought the concept into the business arena, the concept of mental toughness. And he identified 4 components of mental toughness, as you can see there before you. What he said is about having self-awareness and confidence in your own skin. And his research shows that mentally tough individuals perform up to 25% better than those without mental toughness. So some real business benefits for individuals, leaders, teams to develop and increase their mental toughness. So let's look at these 4 C's in a bit more detail. So he talked about control, commitment, challenge, and confidence. He said individuals with high control, they can just get on with it. Regardless of what's going on, they're a safe pair of hands. They just can get on with their job and they can support others around them to do the same. So managing self and managing others in that situation. He saw individuals with high levels of commitment as accountable. The people with this high level of commitment do what they say they're going to do. They get a sense of satisfaction that regardless of circumstance, they will work towards their goals. Achievement is important to people who have that high commitment. And they'll also hold others to account. So can often that mental toughness, they might need to temper that when they're managing their team until they've helped people build that high commitment in themselves. Control and commitment are often the things that we see as being the resilient. They're often seen as a reaction to a situation. When we bring in the other 2 C's, that's when we start to see mental toughness as first thought about by Peter when he brought this into business world. So high challenge, when somebody scores highly in high challenge, when they demonstrate high challenge, this is where they like to innovate and invent. So it actually, in the moment of an issue or a crisis, they actually are problem solving and looking for new ways to do things. They will learn from experience, so quite happy and don't doubt themselves if a mistake's been made, but have that ability to reflect and consider and learn from that mistake or adversity to improve next time. And then we've got confidence. So the ability to stand their ground. So somebody with high confidence has that ability to stand firm in what they believe in and what they think is the right way forward. Equally, whilst they can influence others, and that's something that they pride themselves on, high confidence enables them to also recognise when somebody can influence them to a different way forward that may be better. So stand ground if needed. A great example of this in the public eye, I would say, would be a few years ago, Alex Ferguson. So Alex Ferguson, I think we can absolutely see the control and commitment in lots of football managers. But for him, the challenge was bringing on younger players, breeding new talent in-house. And if you look to the late 90s when he was managing that team there, we can absolutely see control, commitment and challenge. Sometimes he may have overplayed the confidence. So maybe that's where he might have needed to pull back a little bit. But we can all learn new responses. We can all form new habits and we can all challenge unhelpful reactions. The key is to practice new things, to think about what served us well and keep those activities, keep those ways forward, and actually what didn't serve us or the people around us so much. So maybe if Alex Ferguson had maybe reflected on throwing a football boot across the changing room, he may not have done that again in the future if he was connecting with resilience and mental toughness. The stories we tell ourselves are so powerful. So change the story if your stories aren't serving you well. And finally, we're on to resilient teams. You would think, wouldn't you, if you had a group of resilient people, they would become a resilient team. But these two things aren't necessarily the same. The first fundamental thing is individuals need different levels of support in their support network. They need different approaches depending on the type of personality they have. Some people gain resilience from spending time on their own, reflecting and considering. Other people gain resilience from chatting things out with their friends, for example. So it's recognising that the people around us might need different things to us. The cohesion is super important, because if you think the concept of resilience is learning from those moments of adversity, we have to be confident that we can share mistakes, disagree and challenge each other without any negative repercussions from our leader, if we're going to have that cohesion, and then the creativity to problem solve and do things differently in the future. Clarity of goals is really important as well. Uncertainty of any form will undermine resilience within an individual and within a team. So teams need to know not only the overarching goal for their area of the business, but how that fits into the bigger vision and strategy for the organisation, and also how their personal goals then fit that. So really think about how you communicate vision to your teams, how you learn best practice from mistakes with your teams. When you think about cohesion, are you a team that's cohesive when under pressure? Or are you a team that's only cohesive when things are going well? Or perhaps you overplay one of those areas. Maybe you're a team that's only cohesive when you're under pressure, and the rest of the time you're off working in silos. That's not going to help with resilience. We need to have some positive experiences with our team and our colleagues as well. Or maybe you're a team that a blame culture comes in and we fall apart. We're cohesive until we're under pressure, and then the blame culture can start. So really think about the quality of cohesion within your team. A great example, though they've not had such a good story in the press today, but a great example are the Red Arrows. They are very open about their mistakes, and I'm expecting to see, following the unfortunate tragic accident yesterday, they're very explicit in learning from their mistakes. They're very explicit in sharing what happened and what's gone wrong. And I think that's something that we can all learn from, that ability to debrief thoroughly when things haven't necessarily gone so well. So in summary, resilience, grit and positive mindsets can be developed. We can develop them by reflecting on when times haven't been so easy and how we responded. The things that worked well, keep them. The things that didn't work so well, find strategies for reframing or rephrasing that situation, whether that be a positive statement, like what would Beyonce do, just to stop the reaction so you can choose a more positive action, or whether it's doing an emotions audit to think about who or what's pressing my hot buttons at the moment and thinking about what you might do to mitigate against that. We can role model resilience to others through the work we do every day. But adapting to new circumstances, trying something new, whether that's just something simple like changing your lunchtime routine, through to something huge like jumping out of an aeroplane on a skydive. But if we learn to be able to adapt to new circumstances quickly, we can then problem solve quickly. We're more agile, we're more flexible when we need to be within the workplace. Keep messages to your team positive. Whilst recognising the situation might be positive, keep your messages positive about the situation. Look for the way forward, look for the next step, look for the bigger goal. Remind people of what we're moving towards, both personally and organisationally. And then consider the work everyone engages, opportunities for learning and development. So maybe have monthly reviews with the team. What's worked well, what's not gone so well? What are our aspirations and hopes for the next month? Encourage your staff to take on new challenges as well. A little bit more of a summary here. And remember to have support networks around you, both social and within work. Think about the impact of stress. Think about how you can allow yourself and team members time for recovery after a crisis, whether that's as small as a coffee break or maybe a little bit of time out to spend some time with each other as a team, or it may be more appropriate to go home. And stay open to feedback. Don't be Alex Ferguson and increase your confidence so much that you become rigid in your approach. This will support team cohesiveness, allow people to share and discuss best practice and learnings. Here are the references that you will receive after the webinar today. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar. I hope you've taken some tips away, some food for thought, and I hope you enjoy the further reading when you receive them. It just leaves me to thank you so much for your time and attention, and to pass over to questions for the last 5 minutes of our time together today. Thank you.
Thanks you very much, Rachel, for that really interesting webinar. We have had 2 questions that I think immediately I can answer. One person wanted to know why the sound had faded when Jane was introducing you. So we can apologise for that. And I think you said that you're Rachel James Patch, an inspirational, I think we've all seen that today, developer of people and owner of Fairway Learning. So apologies for that sound interference at the beginning. The second question was our use of PR. Were we talking about PR as short for personal resilience or public relations? And it was actually public relations. So now on to the interesting questions. One person wants to know, when a team member of yours has suffered a setback, what is your resilience first aid?
So I think it's back to when we were thinking about the PR crisis, because if they've had a setback, for them, that is a crisis. And I think my number one tip is be human. So how would you discuss this with a loved one or a close friend? So be human first, then be their leader. So
I think that's good advice there. Another question about, is resilience, or what's your view, if people we know that keep on making the same mistake over and over again, which seems to have a certain resilience about it because they're not experiencing it as a setback. What's your challenge to that? Because that's not really resilience, is it? It's more about not learning. How could you differentiate for us?
Not learning, I would probably give them activity or challenge if I was their leader that didn't seem directly connected to that repeated behaviour, and use something like 21-day habit change. So get them to do something small that I would know would contribute to the end result, and then just get them to see some success from that. So again, it's easy to recognise with diet and weight loss, for example. So I've been encouraging my husband to spend time with me at our local gym, because I focused on I wanted him to spend time with me. It was really, I wanted him to lose half a stone, which he has now done without realising he was losing half a stone.
That's good advice. Well, that just leads into our final question, really. Sometimes it's easier to help a team member, but what do you do when your boss appears to be lacking resilience? How do you help your boss be more resilient?
Oh, that's always a tricky one, isn't it? I try to take the hierarchy out of the situation, hold a mirror up. So rather than point out the situation with statement, ask the question. How do you think that went? What do you think the impact was? Do you think we should gather some feedback? So I would do it that way. Ask them to review and consider with a little bit of gentle support.
Oh, thanks very much, Rachel. I think that's really great advice for all of us. And thank you. I'm afraid we're out of time now, so it's only for me to thank you once again, and to everybody who's joined us this lunchtime for the webinar.